Hey, this is Jake calling in. Before I get into my stories, I just want to say up front, I'm not someone who claims to have any kind of special gift or sixth sense. I don't have any psychic abilities. I'm not from some family that practices rituals or anything like that. I'm just a regular guy. But over the years, working different jobs, I've had more than my share of experiences I genuinely can't explain. Let me start with some background so what I'm about to tell you actually makes sense. For a while, I worked overnight security at a large shopping mall in Tainan, in southern Taiwan. My job was basically to watch over the place after closing time until it reopened the next morning. We'd patrol the floors, check that nobody unauthorized was still inside, monitor the security feeds, and manage the fire suppression systems from the control room. We called our command center the fire control room. It's where all the CCTV feeds came in, and where we handled any alarms or safety systems. On any given night shift, there were 3 of us. One person would be stationed in the fire control room watching the cameras, and the other 2 would be out doing floor patrols. We called that running live. One thing that made the job harder than it sounds, every single night after closing, we'd find homeless individuals who had managed to slip inside and were sleeping in the lobby, or tucked into stairwells, or hiding in restrooms. We weren't kicking them out because of who they were. It was just policy. The mall was closed, and no unauthorized persons could be on the premises. But if someone really wanted to hide from us? The place was enormous. They could tuck into a corner and we might never find them. That was always a pressure point for us. If anyone was found by the morning crew, we were the ones who'd take the heat for it. One particular night, after we'd finished clearing the floors and it was getting past midnight, I started my solo patrol on the upper levels. I was working the 5th floor, the women's fashion section. All the lights were off. I was walking the floor alone with just a flashlight, circling through the racks and displays. I'll be honest, there's something deeply unsettling about being completely alone in a massive building in the dark. Even when you know nothing is there, your body just doesn't totally believe it. I was sweeping my flashlight around when I heard something. A faint rattling, scraping sound coming from somewhere across the floor. Clatter, clatter, thud. Over and over. Rhythmic, almost. I didn't panic, figured it might be one of the night vendors doing unauthorized setup work and failing to check in with us. I walked toward the sound. As I got closer, the sound got clearer. I stepped into one of the store sections and swept my flashlight around. There was a person sitting on the floor, their back to me. From the look of them, they were clearly homeless. I started to say, "Excuse me, sir, you're going to need to leave," and then I froze. The person had knocked over one of the display mannequins and was sitting on top of it. In one hand, they were holding a soju bottle, a glass liquor bottle, and they were smashing it, over and over, against the mannequin's head. I just stood there. I couldn't speak. The person glanced back at me once, just a brief look, then turned around and kept going. Like I wasn't even there. The bottle was breaking with each impact. Glass was scattering across the floor. The person's hand was bleeding heavily. And then, this is where it got truly disturbing, they would scoop the broken glass up off the floor with their bare hands, grip it, and keep smashing. Hand dripping blood, not reacting to the pain at all. It took me a second longer to register the rest of what I was seeing. The person had no pants on. No underwear. Nothing below the waist. And the mannequin, it was a female mannequin, dressed in women's clothing. The clothes had been torn apart, not cut, but physically ripped. The mannequin's arm had been wrenched off and thrown to the side. There was a wet stain spreading across the floor. I don't have a word for what it looked like. It looked like an assault. On a mannequin. But the intensity, the violence, the complete indifference to my presence, it was one of the most frightening things I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot. I grabbed the person's shoulder. "Stop. Stop. Please get up." They shook me off. The broken bottle was still in their grip. I couldn't safely restrain them. I radioed my partner, then called the fire control room. I need police on the 5th floor, women's section, northeast corner, now. Check the CCTV. The police arrived in under 10 minutes. They took the person away. I didn't sleep well that night. Not because of ghosts, because of a very real, very human encounter that reminded me, the scariest thing out there doesn't have to be supernatural. If that person had decided, in that moment, to direct that same violence at a real person, say, a woman working late alone in an office somewhere, I don't even want to think about it. The second story from that same job is the one that made me quit. Different night, same building. 3 of us again, me, my partner who I'll call Hyun, and our supervisor, the floor manager, who ran the fire control room that evening. I liked this manager a lot. He'd started as a part-timer just like us and worked his way up. Didn't pull rank. We could joke around with him. Hyun and I split the floors, he took the lower levels, I took the upper floors, floors 5 through 8. I worked my way down from 8, then 7, then arrived on the 6th floor. Standard patrol on each floor goes like this: first you do a full lap of the shopping floor. Then you check the employee break room on that floor, make sure no heating equipment got left on. Then you check what we call the shared storage room, a utility-style closet where the individual stores would keep spare mannequins, display fixtures, and inventory boxes. You check that nothing's on fire, nothing's fallen over, and then you move on. I finished the 6th floor main circuit, then stepped into the shared storage room. Did my sweep. Nothing seemed wrong. I turned to leave. A thud behind me. I spun around. A shoebox had fallen off one of the shelves and landed on the concrete floor. I startled, said something under my breath, then walked over to check it. Inside was a pair of women's shoes. Pale pink. Low-heeled flats. Nothing unusual. I figured the shelf had been uneven. I picked the box up, put it back, did one more scan with the flashlight, then turned to leave again. Another thud. Same box. Same shelf. Same spot on the floor. I don't scare easy. But that second thud went straight through me. I thought for a second about leaving it, pretending I hadn't seen it, but then I thought about what would happen if that box ended up damaged and someone pinned it on me. So I walked back over, closed my eyes, picked up the box, and basically threw it back onto the shelf from arm's length. Then I left the room without looking back. Back in the corridor, my radio crackled. The floor manager's voice, Jake. Jake, what are you doing in there? You running some kind of midnight workout? I explained about the box. He laughed it off. Nothing fell. Nothing's there. I can see the whole shelf on camera. I went back to the fire control room after finishing my patrol. The manager pulled up the CCTV recording from the storage room and played it back for all 3 of us. On the footage, the shelf was empty. No shoebox. Nothing. What you could see on camera was me entering the room, doing nothing in particular, then stopping and turning around. Then crouching down, picking up what looked like nothing, standing back up, appearing to place something on the empty shelf. Then leaving, stopping again, running back in, crouching again, standing, appearing to throw nothing onto the empty shelf. Then leaving fast. If you didn't know what I had seen, I looked completely insane. The manager watched the footage and just said, flatly, weird. Get some sleep. I came back for the next shift not wanting to go anywhere near the 6th floor again. Hyun teased me about it. I asked him flat out to swap floors. He laughed. We did rock paper scissors. I lost. So I went back to the upper floors. I got through 8 and 7 fine. On 6, I urgently needed to use the restroom, and the nearest employee restroom meant walking past the storage room, which I did, eyes forward, telling myself I wasn't going in there. Inside the employee restroom, I turned on the faucet to wash up after. Nothing came out. Tried the secondary faucet. Nothing. Water outage? No notice had been sent. I turned around. The stall doors, which had all been open when I entered, had been opened just 30 seconds earlier. While I stood there, one of them swung shut on its own. Hard. Not a draft. There's no window in that room. I didn't wait. I ran. Not just speedwalked, I ran. And in the corridor outside, I nearly tripped because the storage room door was wide open. I hadn't touched it. Hyun was on the lower floors. No one else was on 6. I radioed the floor manager and basically yelled at him to check the cameras. He called me back on my cell. Jake, calm down. I'm looking at you on the 6th floor and you are the only person there. Why are you screaming into the radio? He told me to come down to the fire control room. I thought I was going to get chewed out for making a scene on the radio. Instead, the manager sat me down, pulled up the footage of the hallway outside the storage room, and showed me the storage room door was shut when I walked into the restroom. About 30 seconds after I disappeared from view, it opened on its own. About a minute later, I burst out of the restroom and nearly fell in the hallway. The manager went quiet. He had me explain everything I'd seen both nights. I told him about the box both times, the shoes, and just now the door and the faucet. Then he asked me, Jake, what floor are we on? 6. What's the 6th floor? Menswear. Right, he said. So why were there women's shoes in a menswear storage room? I hadn't thought about that. He sighed. He told me the whole story. What I'm about to tell you happened about 16 years before that night. At the time, the 6th floor wasn't menswear. It was the children's wear section. One of the small boutique stores was run by a woman in her mid-30s. She managed it with just one part-time helper. The helper quit under bad circumstances. A fight over wages, unpaid hours, a dispute about money that never got resolved. The helper left angry. And then she came back. The next day, the ex-helper showed up with her mother, claiming to be a customer. And then again the day after. And again. For weeks, then months, she kept coming back, doing things like knocking merchandise off the shelves, accidentally stepping on children's clothing, filing complaints about invented violations. The kind of campaign where every move is technically legal but the cumulative effect is harassment. At one point, she bought an item, paid in cash, no receipt was issued, and she came back the next day to report the store for an illegal cash transaction. Fines were levied. This went on for months. The store owner was pregnant at the time. She was already exhausted, working alone, physically demanding hours, no replacement staff. The sustained harassment broke her down. She went into the hospital. The baby didn't survive. After that, she came back to work but wasn't really there. She'd sit at the store counter and just stare. When other employees asked if she was okay, she'd say she just had some organizing to do. The night the mall closed, she was the only one left on her floor. She went into the shared storage room. She took off her shoes, pale pink, low-heeled flats, and placed them neatly on a shelf. And then she used the ceiling fixtures to take her own life. The night security crew found her. That same week, the floor manager at the time, who was different from the one I worked under, called in a spiritual consultant they trusted. The consultant came, asked if there were any personal belongings of the deceased left behind, and when they found the shoes, said, "Take them to me immediately." 2 talismans were prepared, one in each shoe. The shoes were to be burned at the location where she had died, in that same storage room. Since the mall was still operating, it had to happen at night, after closing. The fire control room manager at the time killed the fire suppression sensors temporarily so they could burn the items safely. The spiritual consultant said the ritual would need to be repeated on specific cycles, not a fixed interval like every 5 years, but years meeting certain astrological or spiritual criteria. Apparently, those cycles don't follow a simple calendar. Think of it like certain lunar or zodiac conditions aligning, rare, but recurring. Here's what happened. In the 16 years since the original incident, every staff member who knew about it had either quit or transferred. The floor manager who had overseen the ritual got promoted to a corporate position and moved on. By the time I started working there, nobody currently employed had any memory of it. Even my direct supervisor, who had been there longer than most, had completely forgotten. Until the night I told him about the pink shoes, and it all came back to him. I stayed the rest of that night with the team. I couldn't face going home alone in the dark after hearing all of that. The next morning, I went home, sat with it for 2 days, and then called my supervisor and gave notice. I told him I needed to go back to school anyway, which was true. But honestly, I could not walk those floors again after knowing what I knew. This second story is from my time in the military. I was assigned to a reconnaissance unit attached to a brigade, not a division-level unit, but a regimental one. The difference matters for one reason: our unit rotated into what the military calls a GP, a guard post. This is an isolated, fortified position that sits inside a demilitarized zone, farther forward than the main line of defense. In our case, it was positioned so close to the northern border that you could observe the other side with binoculars and see them watching you back. Under international agreements, the post was technically staffed by military police rather than regular soldiers. It's a legal technicality that allows armed personnel inside a demilitarized zone. I was fresh out of training when I was first rotated in. I just made private first class. I won't pretend I handled it gracefully. Even experienced soldiers find that posting difficult: the isolation, the proximity to a real adversarial force, the indefinite tension. I lost sleep. I had sleep paralysis episodes, which I'd experienced before when exhausted, so at first I didn't attach any significance to them. I mentioned the sleep problems to my squad leader, a senior corporal I trusted. Instead of the usual joking response you'd expect from a soldier, "Ooh, you see a ghost," he got quiet. Then he said, almost casually, "Yeah. You're probably getting visited." I didn't know what that meant. Before I could ask, another soldier walked up, caught wind of the conversation, and said, "Already? You're the first one this rotation." They explained. Apparently, nearly every soldier who had ever spent extended time at that outpost had experienced sleep paralysis at least once. And they had all described the same figure. A woman. Foreign-looking, curly hair, darker skin, unlike anyone you'd expect to see there. A woman who did not belong to any part of that country's history they could point to. I didn't believe them. I figured it was unit folklore, the kind of story experienced soldiers tell junior soldiers to mess with their heads. I filed it away and moved on. A few nights later, I came off a late watch shift around 2 a.m., went through the usual routine, changed clothes, rinsed off, said goodnight to my watch partner. I laid down completely exhausted. Couldn't sleep. Tossed and turned for what felt like 45 minutes to an hour. Finally drifted off. Almost immediately, I felt a crushing pressure on my chest. Not like indigestion. Like something heavy, dense, cold, had been placed directly on my sternum. I opened my eyes. A pair of bare feet was standing on my chest. The feet were blackened, like frostbite. I looked up. A woman in a black dress was standing on me. My first instinct, and I'm proud of this, was to try to reason my way out of it. I told myself, "You're having sleep paralysis. This is a hallucination your brain is generating because of what the squad leader told you. This is not real." I focused on my fingers and toes and tried to wiggle them. That usually breaks the paralysis for me. It didn't work. Then she laughed. A high-pitched, shrieking kind of laughter loud enough, to my perception, to wake everyone in the room. But no one stirred. 20-plus soldiers sleeping soundly all around me while I lay there completely unable to move, watching this figure run back and forth across the room, laughing like she'd lost her mind. Her eyes were red, not bloodshot, but glowing, the color of an emergency exit light in a dark hallway. I don't know how long it lasted. An hour by my internal clock. Then it was like a switch flipped. Darkness. I jolted awake. I checked the time. 2:40 a.m. Maybe 2:45. That couldn't be right. I'd been off watch at 2 o'clock. It had taken me at least 20 minutes to get settled. Then I'd been awake for close to an hour before drifting off. Then this, whatever it was, felt like another hour. It should have been at least 4:30. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. When daylight came, I decided, this was a bad dream, it wasn't real, I'm not telling anyone. I told no one. About 2 days later, I was on an earlier watch rotation and sleeping soundly, one of the few nights I actually slept through when the lights in the entire barracks room came on at once. At that posting, lights coming on in the middle of the night meant one thing, a situation. An incursion, a defector crossing, an armed incident. We trained for it constantly. So when the lights hit, I was out of bed and reaching for my gear before I was even fully awake. Then I noticed no one was running. No one was shouting. The room was eerily still. People were sitting up, all looking in the same direction. I turned around. The duty officer, a lieutenant, was leaning over a bunk on the opposite side of the room, shaking someone and shouting their name. The soldier in that bunk, I'll call him Tolbai, was seizing. Eyes rolled back, body trembling, saliva running down his chin. The medical corpsman got called in. Tolbai was loaded into the commanding officer's personal vehicle and driven to the nearest hospital at high speed. There was no ambulance stationed at the outpost. By the next afternoon, our company commander informed us that Tolbai was in stable condition, but would not be returning to our unit. He was being transferred to a different company after medical evaluation and counseling. Gossip travels fast in a closed military environment. Within a day, the rumor was that Tolbai was applying for medical discharge. It seemed extreme to me, he wasn't the kind of person to avoid difficult duty. But I filed it away. About 5 weeks later, our rotation ended ahead of schedule. We came back down to the main base. Tolbai had been reassigned to a different company rather than discharged. I ran into him in the smoking area. We talked. After making sure no one else could hear, Tolbai asked me directly, "Did you get sleep paralysis up there?" I told him yeah, a couple of times. Figured it was exhaustion. He went pale. "Jake, did you see anything?" I told him about the figure, the woman, the black dress, the red eyes, but framed it as a possible dream. Told him I wasn't sure it was real. He grabbed my arm. "I saw the same thing," he said. "Exactly the same. The dress. The feet. The red eyes." I didn't know sleep paralysis could even do that. I've never had it before. Then he told me what happened to him. He had woken up with the same crushing chest pressure I had. Looked up, saw the same woman standing on him. But Tolbai is a serious Christian, has been his whole life. So his instinct was to fight back with prayer. He started singing hymns in his head. First one, then another, then a third. Then he started praying directly, invoking the name of Jesus, commanding the spirit to leave, the whole thing. He did this for what felt like an hour. At one point it seemed to be working, the figure had gone cold and expressionless. He took that as a sign he was breaking through. Prayed harder. Then the temperature dropped sharply, and the figure stopped standing on him and sat down on his chest instead, pressing both hands against his ribcage. The sensation, he said, was like dry ice, burning cold, simultaneously scalding, intensely painful. He kept praying. He recited the Lord's Prayer. The figure laughed in his face while he did it. He recited it again. And again. Over and over, for what felt like another hour. Then the laughing stopped abruptly. The figure tilted its head at him with what looked like genuine curiosity. And then it opened its mouth. The sound that came out was the Lord's Prayer. Played backward. Every syllable, every phrase, but inverted, reversed, like a recording run in reverse. Tolbai understood immediately what he was hearing. He'd just spent an hour repeating those words. He knew them cold. That was the moment the film cut out for him. He lost consciousness. Woke up in a hospital. When I heard that, I went back to the squad leader and told him I was ready to believe. I said, I saw the same woman. Tolbai saw the same woman. This isn't a story you tell new soldiers anymore. This is something that actually happens there. The squad leader confirmed it. The whole unit knew. They just didn't talk about it, an unspoken agreement to keep it quiet. Eventually, the pattern of incidents escalated enough that a senior soldier in another platoon brought it to the company commander's attention. The commander contacted the unit's chaplain. The chaplain came up to the outpost and conducted a prayer ceremony. The executive officer, separately, obtained what he described as protective charms and buried them on the grounds. After that, nothing. Subsequent rotations reported no incidents. Not a single case of sleep paralysis with the same description. Not while I was there, not from the soldiers who came up after us. As for who the woman was, nobody ever confirmed it. But the rumor that circulated was this: decades earlier, when the post was first established, a foreign officer had been stationed there as part of an exchange program. This officer allegedly brought a woman with him, not military, not authorized to be there. When she told him she was pregnant, he is said to have taken her to the outpost, the most isolated, unmonitored location available at the time, and killed her there to prevent the story from getting out. No cameras. No witnesses. No record. Whether that's true, no one can say. But if you ask me why there's a foreign woman's ghost in a sealed military outpost on the northern border, that story is the most coherent explanation I've ever heard. That's what I saw. Both of it. Real. Thanks for letting me share this. Stay safe out there, and honestly, the scariest things I ever encountered weren't the ones I couldn't explain. It's the ones I could.